So Vineet, you're here at the Parental Alienation Symposium up in Frisco. What brings you up here?
I believe that this is a watershed moment that the world's perception on parental alienation is going to be changed today. This is going to be a before Dallas and after Dallas symposium scenario where we are going to see very rapid improvement and awareness and understanding and enforcement of the kind of severe psychological damage that this represents. In fact, I'll go even further to say that families that are caught up in this, like in my case, it starts with the grandparents. My parents have been denied a relationship with their grandchildren, and the grandchildren have been denied a right with their grandparents. They have lost tremendously there. It affects the parents' generation, mine. It affects the children the most severely. But not only that, it also affects the next two unborn generations of my family.
Absolutely, and that's something that very few people talk about. Craig Childress was outstanding this morning, and he talked about the transmission of this pathology, and he did not call it. He said, as a clinical psychologist, he would not call it parental alienation. He calls it attachment-based pathology. It's a pathology, and but he also said too that it's not just with one generation. In fact, sometimes these things are being acted out from a person's childhood, and it becomes transgenerational. What you're saying about the grandparents, the grandchildren, and how that's going to affect, absolutely. I appreciate your perspective on that, and for mentioning that. And
I'd like to add to that I've seen cases where this now becomes a regular feature where the children are so-called severing their relationship with their parent. This becomes a regular pattern in every generation of the family going forward.
It does. I've seen it happen as well. So let me ask you another question here. You mentioned that you were going to be going, well, because right now they're having a presentation on the school, the complexity that schools face with custody issues and everything else. Who gets the children? What can the parents come into a parent-teacher conference? Numerous scenarios that you just blow your mind. But you said that you were taking part of that in, but at the same time, you're going to be speaking at a college in the near future?
Yes, actually two different things. First, I'll talk about the first part of what you talked.
Okay.
My school district, we went through. In fact, he's talking about right before the day before spring break. Last year exactly, it was my spring break, and mom walks in and insists that it's her weekend, and the weekend possession overrides the special holiday possession, which makes no sense. I explained to the school officials, I said, if the holiday possession is secondary to the regular weekend possession, then every year Thanksgiving alternates between parents, but Thanksgiving is always the Thanksgiving weekend is the third weekend of the month. So if the parent has a third weekend, then the other parent will never get an entire Thanksgiving with their children.
You make it
makes
very
no
good
sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense. You're right.
But the school principal was called of a very large high school and asked to make an interpretation on the spot, and he made the wrong interpretation. But
so you've been affected by this personally yourself?
Yes. Now the second part, I've been very active because I think the awareness, I've been successful in getting several people to come to this. But for every person that's here, I have 4 or 5 others that I approached that didn't come.
Right.
But one of the things to remember is don't get disappointed, because even the ones that didn't come, for example, one of the major university psychology department here, they're actually doing a course. They recognize it's called American Family Crisis. They're offering a course to their students right now.
Wow.
Now, the professor there, one of the lead professors there, said this is exam week, so they didn't come, but he said, next month you come back to our weekly staff meeting and I'll give you time on the agenda to tell my entire staff about this. And I've managed to bring one of their recent graduates. She's here. And so she and I are going to go, and these professors are going to see one of their own students who is going to assist me in presenting this information right to them. So it creates a very fertile environment to again, even though it doesn't end with, I couldn't get this person to come here. You have to look at it like I used to be in sales, so I look at it as a follow-up sales type activity where you get a second shot.
Right.
Even though you didn't get the first thing that you wanted them to do, you get them on the second thing as a thing, and even that will also open the door and start the awareness, because what we need to do is each one of us is to be out there being a warrior, being an ambassador to bring more and more people into this awareness, because knowledge is what will turn the tide around and fight this thing.
One thing that I've appreciated hearing here is that, sometimes when people talk about parental alienation or whatever you want to term it, it's just a family issue, it's just this, maybe you're being oversensitive. But when Craig Childress talked, Dr. Craig Childress, he was talking about it being a pathology. He was talking about it being preventable. He was talking about treatment options. He was talking about courts intervening and telling the alienating parent, stop it, knock it off. You've got 6 months to get your behavior together. And one of the things he talked about was, in the case of divorce, that within 6 months, you often know what's going to be taking place there, and you need to intervene at that point in time so that this does not become the big problem that people are talking about. Any comments on that?
Oh yes, I will answer that in two parts. The first part is that this thing is, even what Childress is saying is, I believe, not going far enough. Because when this happens, for example, one of the biggest challenge for a parent is the death of their child. That devastates a parent.
Absolutely.
Most of them never recover.
Right.
I've got scientific papers on this, which I can provide. But the scientific paper I have says, in the worst case scenario, when a child dies, a parent only recovers when they have another child to replace, or they find meaning in that child's death. In this case, this is complete nonsense. There is no meaning to be found in the death of this child that lives a mile down the road and is still alive.
Yeah.
But see, your subconscious mind goes into traumatic grieving process. It is a toxic stress. It is a complex trauma. It results in complex PTSD. And the science of adverse childhood experiences goes further to say this traumatic effects cause dangerous teen behaviors, teen vagrancy, teen suicide, teen pregnancy, teen drugs, teen vagrancy. Then it leads to early onset of killer diseases and finally premature death. If you have an A score high enough, the child will end up with a 20-year reduction in life expectancy. Therefore, this is now, the science of ACEs is correlating this directly to death. So basically, by allowing this to happen, you might as well shoot a person with a delayed action bullet. You shot them, the bullet has penetrated the body. The only thing is it's bloodless, and the body, the parent probably drops dead 10 to 15 years later from the trauma, and the child drops dead from this trauma 30 to 40 years later. Nevertheless, this is directly related to that. So it rises to the level of manslaughter, third, second, or first degree murder type situations. And we need to put a stop to this.
You have made a very strong point. I know that as far as, when they talk about children of divorce, they're more susceptible to being high school dropouts and more susceptible to alcoholism, the drug use. Girls are more susceptible to becoming a teenage pregnant as an unwed mother. The prison, the fact that the income mobility is not present. A lot of times these children live in poverty and they're at a disadvantage for the rest of their lives just because of a divorce. But you're taking this further. You're talking about manslaughter or premeditated murder almost.
Yes, this is what it is, and society needs to rise up to recognize that. I will go further to say, I come from an Eastern philosophy background, and we have, with our 2,000, 3,000 year history, we have an understanding. Let me put it this way. The human beings have the only child that is born that comes born undeveloped. Most animals are viable within 15 minutes of birth or 30 minutes of birth.
Right.
And they're only dependent on their parent for a very short duration for food and protection, and then they become independent very rapidly.
Right.
Human beings, a child's brain doesn't finish developing until they are 26 years old. And what is becoming very, very apparent is this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, I'm now a citizen of the United States, so I'm very much part of this. So when I say these comments, I'm not trying to denigrate, but I'll say this Western philosophy of, the mom carried the child in the womb, and so the mom is the superior parent. That's all humbug.
It is.
Okay, because the development of the brain is impacted by both parents, and it continues until the age of 26. That's why the Indian guru, who, by the way, comes here to the US and fills coliseums full of people who want his knowledge, he says having a child is a 20-year no-out commitment.
I remember you said that before, and I remember you said that, and I quoted that, and a lot of people responded to that, because you're right. It's not just, we're going to hook up and have a baby and then split our separate ways, or even in the case of divorce, which I mean, I'm also for the repeal of a lot of reform in that area and the repeal of no-fault divorce. But it is a 20-year commitment.
Yes.
And I look at something,
It's a minimum 20-year commitment.
Right. And Vineet, I look at something like this. When I enlisted in the military, I was in the Army. I got in there, my recruiter, I felt lied to me and everything. I wanted out within, a month. I'm like, you know what, I was upset because I felt lied to, but I had a 4-year commitment and I had to finish it. And then even after my 4-year commitment was done, I had another 4 years in the individual reserves. There was no way out. And I think that what you're talking about is so crucial, that when you have children, you have for each child a minimum of 20-year commitment. So if you have, you have another child when the older child is 10 years old, you still got another 20 years there. You're making some very interesting points that are not made by many people.
Unfortunately, I've lived the horrible experience, and through that, the Lord has given me insight that I would have probably not developed.
Yeah.
But faced with this adversity, I've had to spend many sleepless nights pondering this thing, and that is why it has given me the clarity of seeing the situation. And I'll say this, if I recall, in the 80s, President of California, Ronald Reagan, started the no-fault divorce thing.
He did.
It was the worst idea that we could have ever had.
And he even he regretted that. He said it was one of the 2 worst decisions he made in public office.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. He said, it was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made in public office.
Yes.
And there are some people that think maybe he was deceived about the whole thing. In fact, if you read, there's a book called Stolen Vows by Judy Prejko, Parejko. She goes into the whole thing with the California, the way it was presented and stuff like that. It's very illuminating because there's parts of that we have erased, as but what maybe what he was presented was not.
That's good to hear, because I have regard for many things Reagan did.
Yeah,
but
but
this
that
thing
was
I didn't
not.
know, and I felt that was one of the worst things he had done.
Yeah.
And it's good to hear at least that he realized. And I also understand there's another factor, and this is our biggest enemy. We've got a $50 to $70 billion or whatever it is. I've heard different figures. Somebody says 5 billion, some says 50, some says 70. But whatever the number is, we put money and we put a headhunting fee on this thing, and we've got rabid attorneys who are like hyenas chasing profit.
You mean the divorce industry?
Yeah, divorce industry.
Yeah, I know that they.
And this whole, we have to totally demonetize, and so that is why they are our biggest enemy. These guys want to keep this business going, but this is like, taking a battle tank and driving it over innocent parents and, most importantly, children, and just crushing their bodies under this tank and this greed, and they don't understand what is going on. Hitler used to gas the Jews.
Yes.
Okay? And this thing is, I talked about the delayed action bullet. That's basically a psychological bullet that renders you a psychological zombie, and now you're just living your life zombie-like for the next 10, 15, 30 years before finally you drop dead.
Yeah.
And so therefore, my estimate based on Dr. Jennifer Harman's paper, scientific paper, where she says 10.5 million severely affected parents in the United States from parental alienation. If you figure that number, the U.S. Census Bureau says there's 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8 children per single father, single mother, or joint family, intact family. So I take the middle number, 1.7, multiplied by 10.5 million, gives me 17 point something. Add the 2, it gives me 28 point something million. I round that to 30 million. And that is the number of severely affected children in the United States affected by this, that are all, if nothing happens to change the course of their life, have been shot with this bullet, and they are in this manslaughter, first degree, second degree, third degree murder type situation involved here. And to put that in perspective, the Nazis only killed 6 million Jews.
Absolutely.
This is 30 million. That's 5 times that. And one of the lessons that the Holocaust taught us is that we would never let it happen again. But here it is happening right in front of our bloody noses. But it's just bloodless, and it is not visible because it's all psychological. But heaven's sake, people, open your eyes and stop this. It has to stop. And this whole thing of no-fault divorce, see, people who do this have been traumatized.
Right.
People who become violent have been traumatized. The science of ACE very clearly shows that. So we have to take a more humanistic approach and say, we have this American philosophy, you've done violence against the family, so you're out. 1 strike, you're out. Or we fill our jails with people where 3 strikes, you're out. this is a completely bogus philosophy that is just going to build more and more jails, and we never have enough money to build as many jails to put this thing. Yeah. We have to totally scrap this and go to the philosophy of being trauma aware, adverse childhood experiences, a juggernaut technology, science that will, just like the steam engine revolutionized and brought on the industrial revolution, the science of ACEs has the capability to do that. We need to adopt it as quickly as possible and totally do a 180 on many of the things that the United States is doing. This whole police government complex where they are taking these absolutely hardcore approaches to these things is very much the root of the problem.
Right. And I was talking with an attorney last night, in fact, on the phone, and a family law attorney, and she said, you will never find justice in family court. What they will do, they are going to beat you into submission. Their goal is to get you to submit. Now, you can submit easily, or you can get financially devastated, but in the end, that's what it is. And the whole business of the divorce industry, and especially the attorneys, the family law attorneys, the guardian ad litem, everything on and on and on. She was talking about how the attorneys will actually keep making their money, but then of course, once they make their money, they contribute to the judge's re-election campaign. And I'm like, how corrupt and crooked is that? The very judge that's going to probably rule in your favor, if he rules in your favor, you're going to give him money, which he's going to say, well, next time come back and see me. It just keeps on building. It's just a corrupt.
Just this week, an attorney here in Texas sent me a report by the American Bar Association, which I don't know what the date is, but it's many years old now, and they've already identified. They said this process of judges standing for election and being forced to raise campaign money every 4 years, and the costs are just going higher and higher every time to get stand for election. We need to, at least for the judicial positions, we have to get public funding for elections. We have to do away with these judges having to raise their own money, because that totally compromises the whole process.
Right.
That's, again, another route. And the American Bar Association has a report from years ago that knows that they won't do anything.
Well, of course they won't, because it's their pocketbook.
Because, see, the thing is, I call this pseudo-incompetence.
Yeah.
These guys, the more incompetent they appear to be, the more money they make.
Yeah.
So if you put me in that situation, why would I do anything more efficiently or correctly? Because I'll make more money by acting like a blunging fool.
Well, and this was another thing that she said, you can send them 500 pages of documents. Now, what'll happen is they'll read every page, because each page is what?
$300 an hour.
Yeah, 300 on the cheap side.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to admitting them into court, there's only a couple of documents that go in there. The judges don't care about this. The appellate, no matter. It doesn't make a difference. You're submitting all of this stuff, taking all of your time, thinking maybe you're going to get justice, and all you're going to do is get raped financially.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I walked in with 2 years of violence video. The American system is again biased there. See, there is a fundamental principle of justice, Western justice, which is natural justice, which says natural justice basically means if the judge is biased, then every order they make is bogus. It's ultra vires in Latin, which means it's no good.
Yeah.
Now here, let's get this in the case of this thing. I was a male victim of family violence. My story was actually written by the major newspaper here, on the bigger side of the two twin cities we have here.
Okay.
The major newspaper there. It didn't make a difference, because see what happens. There is no funding for male victims of family violence.
Right.
But the Violence Against Women Act, as per Wikipedia, is $1.4 billion in funding,
right,
out of which about 500 million comes to the Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women. That 500 million is used to give training to the judges to deliberately be biased and don't consider male victims of family violence.
Yeah.
The whole American system is pre-biased. If you walk in with that situation, they just want to automatically put the mother in the victim situation, and the father is the universal offender.
Yeah.
And when you walk into the opposite situation, they don't know what to do. They get completely confused and bungle around and fall on their face. But right in the courtroom is Lady Justice, blindfolded, holding the scales of justice, showing this thing. That is a deception.
It is.
And here is the funny thing: the United States says we are running a proper judicial system. The judicial system I'll take blood red paint and draw an X around everything, because that damn thing is a deception. Because when you go to that court and see that thing, that's actually a deception and a farce. You expect there that Lady Justice will prevail, she's blindfolded and just think, but they have deliberately, to the tune of $1.4 billion in Violence Against Women Act funding, WAMA, and out of which $500 million is specifically used to brainwash the judges into doing the exact opposite. So the system fails to meet the minimum threshold of natural justice. Therefore, the United States has failed to provide a judicial system that even meets the minimum threshold of justice. So what are we supposed to do as U.S. citizens? Go to international authorities for proper justice? Because I'm declaring, at least in this regard, male victims of family violence, the U.S. justice system is bogus. They are violating the fundamental bedrock principle of natural justice, and therefore they fail to meet the threshold. End of story. I can't even give them an F grade. I've got to give them 10 steps below an F grade for the situation that has been created.
So, that's interesting that you're talking about this. I don't know what you know about my story, but a couple of years ago, my daughter accused me of physical violence against her, called the police, filed a false police report, filed a protective order against me. So I had to go down and defend myself. And the protective order is a pretty serious business. I mean, I could have been fired. She was trying to get me convicted of a felony, and there was nothing that I did. But knowing the system, it's kind of like, okay, you go into it. And during the course of the trial, Vineet, here's what happened. We're about, after we have to first diffuse all the lying testimony. After 15 minutes, we've got 10 minutes left, and then they say, well, you've got 10 minutes to go. So my wife gets up on the stand, and she's hurrying through everything. And then the judge stops for a minute and says, well, I'll let your time is out. I'll let your defendant get up for a few minutes. And then afterwards, she says this. She said, I apologize. Basically, I was writing my decision twice, but now I have to look at the evidence. Now I have to look at the evidence, because fortunately my wife got up there, and we had pictures with the kids, everything else. I got up there and she heard me, and she said, now I have to look at the evidence. And what happened then at that point is that we continued on until the following week. We came back in, and at that point she had looked at the evidence. She heard the rest of the testimony. My daughter cross-examined me and everything else. It was a disaster for her. But I was heartbroken at the same time. But the judge said, no, he said, no, there is nothing here. She denied the protective order. My daughter tried to get a protective order against me for the children, and the judge said denied. I've seen nothing but a loving father here, basically, and a loving grandfather. But what you've said, I don't think people realize how biased it is. I mean, I did nothing, Vineet, and I had to spend $20,000 between two trials to defend myself, because the poor woman's going to cry. And then my ex-wife got up there, and she was acting for an Academy Award for all, now she's lied several times, so I'm actually taking her to court in about, I think either in June or July. I've got to go a roundabout way to go after the perjury charge, but, it's tough.
It's ridiculous, and I tell you, congratulations, you got one of the exceptionally best case outcomes.
I know.
You don't get that.
I know.
I'll tell you, like in my case, I walked in with prima facie video evidence.
Yeah.
But my wife brought in a disgruntled neighbor, landlord, who said, once I raised my voice against him, therefore the judge used that to take a one-way violence situation and legally paper it into a two-way violence situation. 10 months later, the mother's accusations of my violence were proved perjury before the presiding judge, and all he did was appoint an amicus attorney at that point who went ahead for the next 15 months to deadlock the case, completely be biased, and then get thrown off the case 15 months later for her extreme bias against me, which is a violation of the local rules of conduct. But that 15 months, if you add up, it costing me $2,000 a month to be living outside, thrown out of my own fully paid off home. That was given to the violent offender. And it was costing me, several thousand a month in attorney fees. So you do multiply that by 15, say $4,000, $5,000 a month. Times 15 months, it's a huge number. And how can an average middle class guy sustain that kind of thing? So after 4 years of that nonsense, I had to simply bail from the court before they kind of buried me 10 feet deep in terms of a financial hole. And my children were already was in a 10-foot hole psychologically. And I had to just bail out of there. So it was complete coercion. I had to just bail out of the system, which I had no confidence in anymore.
So my attorney said to me at the end, I think she was almost surprised that she knew what the reality was, but she was so thrilled that she won. And she said to me, do you have any idea how many innocent men sit in jail right now because of false allegations? And you could have been there the same way, but the innocent men often get buried, like you said, financially at the same time. Or, the system is such that they will pummel you into submission, because at which point do you say, I can't keep paying, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. At what point is your breaking point? Well, they'll keep going until they find out.
And see, here is the thing. And this is Professor Linda Mills, New York University. She has a JD law degree. She has a master's in social work. And she has a PhD in public health. Mm-hmm. And in 2003, she wrote a book. She said the situation in America with this universal female victim and universal male perpetrator has created a situation where male victims aren't recognized. Number 2 in her book, and it's called Insult to Injury. I'm just reading that.
Right.
And the second conclusion she makes is all psychological abuse is completely under the radar. Which is, with attachment-based parental alienation falls right into it.
Yeah.
And Childress has already written in one of his blogs that he views attachment-based parental alienation as an alternative form of physical abuse. So my ex went from physical abuse, we separated because of the court order, and then she continued right under the court's noses to continue to abuse me using the methods described in attachment-based parental alienation.
Right.
And the court was completely blind to the whole thing. I'm sitting
Right.
there saying, I'll be the good parent.
Yeah.
I'll let my record speak for myself. I'm not going to go into this false allegation slinging deal.
Yeah.
And I'll stand the high ground and it'll be recognized. No.
It's not.
The ex-wife throws in every false allegation in the book. Every time she throws a false allegation, it costs me $20,000 more in legal fees.
Yeah.
And the attorneys are just happy to continue that going until the money runs out.
Do you have anything else that you could throw against them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is utter nonsense. And that the whole system will sit there and these highly paid attorneys will swallow these false allegations.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is my business mentor told me, the way you measure and compensate people drives behavior.
Right.
The way you measure and compensate people drives behavior.
Yep.
So here you have a situation where the attorneys get to partake in $20,000 for every false allegation. Will they say, no, we turn away false allegations because it's perjury and it's not right?
No. Heck no.
It's good business.
It's very good business.
And hey,
if it's recognized before the court,
and if the target parent and the child get shot with that delayed action bullet and then they die 15, 30 years later, our hands are clean.
Yeah.
Rubbish.
Yeah.
The science of ACEs now puts an end to that. And we need to have, just like the Nazi war criminals, the second wave of the prison guards who said, we were ordered by our superior officers during wartime to gas the Jews. Therefore, we did it. The war tribunal said, no, you had a conscience. You shouldn't have done that.
Absolutely.
So
you
these
make
judges,
very good analogies.
whether Department of Justice, Office of Violence of Women are telling you to be biased in one favor, you yourself have gone to law school. You know what is right. You have a conscience. And therefore, just like the Nazi war criminals, you need to be taken to task. And you need to do that because this invokes severe psychological reactions. I will tell you, in 1992, over Swiss airspace, a Russian charter jet containing school children who had earned an incentive to go to Portugal for a vacation because of their academic achievements collided head-on in midair with a DHL cargo jet. Mm-hmm. Nobody survived. The problem was infrastructural because the Swiss airspace controller had a series of organizational problems going all the way to the top. But the air traffic controller was involved. So this Russian father who lost his wife, she happened to jump on the planes with the children. So he lost his wife and children. That drove him to such traumatic grief that he tracked down the air traffic controller, walked to his house. In front of that air traffic controller's little daughter stabbed the air traffic controller to death. Now he was tried, and the second time around on appeal, he was let go because it was ruled temporary insanity. Mm-hmm. And he was let go. This is the kind of thing it drives.
Yeah.
We are a democracy, for heaven's sake, people. Let's settle this peacefully, because if it doesn't, it's going to deteriorate into that kind of situation. And even though these people have practically murdered me and my children, I don't have any ill will to have their blood flow.
Right.
It is better to do this in a controlled manner rather than in a bloody manner.
But
we need to do this because if it's not, the pressure is going to build up to that point.
So Vineet, one thing that I've thought about, and I'm going to tell you because this is my Christian background, gone to seminary and everything else, I think that the churches should be involved in a lot of these issues because, the scripture tells us, I don't know if you're a believer or,
Yes,
I thought you were, but I just wanted to make sure. I don't want to say anything that may be different than your background and everything. But I look at, 1 Corinthians chapter 6 talks about how we should not even be taking a brother or a sister to court, to an unbelieving court. But so I tried to go to the church on multiple occasions. And the churches, not in every case, but in many cases, the churches are just as bad as the legal system. They will take the same brainwashing that has taken place among the judiciary and among the attorneys and everything else, and they'll do the same thing. Well, Vineet, obviously you're a violent man. And I've just been astounded over these things. I've asked them to intervene to help bring reconciliation because that's what the church does. The church tells people to reconcile sinners to God. You repent, put your faith in Christ. But when it comes down to things like between two believers, they're too busy to do it. They don't know how to do it. And I've thought this is just such a failure, not just within the legal system, but within the church. Do you have any? Do you think I'm too off base when I'm saying this, or?
No, I've come to the realization. See, I went to the court and filed a domestic violence charge. I did not file for divorce because I knew intuitively from my Eastern bringing that the children need both parents,
right,
even if it's a violent person.
Right.
Now, understanding this pathology as well as I do now, I understand that mentally the mother has to be limited from psychologically influencing the kids,
right,
but the kids still need the mother.
Right.
But we've got a situation here that simply does not permit the proper solution. That is the proper solution to this problem.
Yeah.
It creates, so they have given now a situation where the mother has single-mindedly, and her focus is very simple. Her pathology, her attachment-based trauma from childhood just gives her one option. She is like a robot on steroids who is simply, every action is to eliminate me from the kid's life, which she has now succeeded.
Yeah.
And so even with spending all the $250,000 just in legal fees in my case and winning 50-50 custody and winning the sole exclusive right to make medical, legal, and educational decisions for the kids, I still have a situation where I have not seen one daughter for 12 months now and the second one for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And she's gone the same way, just exactly like Childress predicted in his blog.
Yeah.
Pathological markers in case I die. He had published that about a year ago, and he predicted exactly this. When you have a borderline personality disordered mother with two daughters, this is the exact scenario that will play out. It's so unfortunate, but he is 99.9% uncannily accurate, and everything in his blogs is my case just happens to miraculously follow exactly what he writes in his blogs a year earlier.
See, it's interesting that you're mentioning this. In my situation, I have two daughters and a son, and I haven't really spoken to any of them for at least a year. My other two daughters for 2 years. Actually, my one daughter sent me some messages to apologize, but I don't know what she was actually apologizing for at the end. My other daughter got married, wouldn't invite me to the wedding, didn't even tell me that she was getting married, didn't tell me that she was engaged, and this is supposed to be normal and okay. But what you mentioned was the relationship you mentioned. There was the mother and the two children, the two daughters, and you're talking about some of these things. I may have to go and read his blog.
Yeah, I know.
So, is there anything? I know it's getting close to lunch here right now. Thank you so much. I enjoy talking with you, and I remember when we went to talk with Senator Connie Burton. As you know, I don't know that much happened from that meeting. From what I hear, it's a little bit unfortunate. Maybe next session, Connie, if you're listening, you can do something. But I know that she's got a lot of other things on her plate as well. Or maybe she let somebody else take the bill. I don't know. But anything you want to add before we head inside?
I'd close with this. I'll say, America, we got no-fault divorce. It was a big mistake. Now we need to put our self-interest aside, and we need to step up and roll that back, because for the child, it's simply traumatic. The money that is being wasted here should be put on the front end to educate people on how to properly pick a mate in life. and to screen out the ones that are incompatible. So they don't end up in these situations, because once you're locked in and have a child, it's a minimum 20-year commitment.
Yeah.
So we need to put it on the front end to prevent these unions from happening, which are doomed to fail.
Yeah.
Some of these people with the trauma, an ACE score, what is your ACE score, should be a mandatory upfront disclosure in the part of the screening process for compatibility.
Yeah.
And if the person has trauma in their life, that should be understood, and mitigation efforts should be done. And only then, if you still feel you have to proceed with that union, then you proceed. But then you understand you're walking in knowing the risk, rather than unknowingly, and then later on it blows up, and then you walk into a system that totally is the antithesis of providing any help whatsoever. So please, America and the rest of the world, because this is affecting many, many countries, Western and other developed countries, and we need to take the Scandinavian model, the Japanese model, demonetize this, and eventually we need to get to a phase where we simply don't have divorce, because even the most amicable divorce is trauma to the kids. So the child, we owe it to our children to give them a good first start in life. And the first thing we can do is to put our selfish interests aside, or our self-interest aside. And if there's a child, you're locked into that 20-year commitment. And that's the only way for a spiritual, moral society, developed society with high level of understanding, to bring its children into the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good to see you again, Vineet.
Thank you.
Thank you.